What if the most powerful story of World War II never made it into a textbook? Not because it lacked courage or sacrifice, but because it was too quiet to be heard. What if the greatest truth about the war wasn't spoken by generals, written in official reports, or captured in black and white photographs, but whispered in graphite, on the fragile pages of a young soldier's sketchbook? And what if that sketchbook, water-stained, torn, nearly lost to the tides of Normandy, held the last living memories of men who never came home? Before history pulled him into its jaws, Eli Turner lived a life marked by simplicity. Kansas was a place where afternoons stretched forever, where the wind moved through wheat fields like an ocean of gold, and where a young man could sit alone on a hillside and feel like the world was too big to ever harm him. Eli spent countless hours in those fields, sometimes lying on his back watching clouds drift lazily across the sky, sometimes sitting with a sketchbook resting on his knees, capturing the gentle curves of the land he called home. He grew up believing the world was a place of calm and beauty. He believed storms were things you could see miles away, things you could prepare for. He was wrong. Eli wasn't a typical young man of the 1940s. While others played baseball or tinkered with trucks, he preferred losing himself in charcoal and paper. He sketched everything: the shadow beneath a barn roof, the way dust floated in sunlight, the way Clara smiled with her whole face. People often found him sitting alone, back hunched, pencil racing across a page, as if he feared beauty might vanish if he didn't catch it fast enough. Drawing wasn't a hobby. It was how he understood the world, how he slowed time down long enough to make sense of it. And in the years to come, when chaos swallowed everything he knew, drawing would become the only piece of himself he had left. The smell of bread, the clinking of porcelain, the low hum of his mother's singing. These were the sounds of Eli's childhood. He remembered the way morning sunlight slid across the kitchen table, warming the pages of his sketchbook as he traced quiet moments into permanence. His mother never complained that he spent more time drawing than talking. She didn't need to. She could read him through his hands, the way they moved quickly when he was excited, slowly when he was sad. He didn't know then how much he would miss that table, how much he would long for the simple peace of watching his mother work, while he sketched the world he thought would last forever. Clara was the kind of girl you didn't just love, you admired. Strong, hopeful, with eyes that held more courage than Eli ever believed he possessed. On the night before he left for training, they walked the dirt road behind her house. The sky was exploding with stars, the Kansas air warm and trembling with crickets. Clara held his hand tightly, as if she could memorize every part of him, before he disappeared into the war. "Promise me you'll come back," she whispered. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Eli didn't know what the world would look like beyond those wheat fields, but he knew one thing. He wanted to return to her more than anything. "I'll do everything I can," he whispered back, a promise built not from certainty, but from hope. Word didn't come to Eli quickly. It arrived quietly, folded neatly inside a government envelope. The draft letter shook in his hands as he read the words, "You are hereby ordered to report." It felt unreal, like someone else's life was printed on that page. But the world was changing. Storm clouds were gathering across Europe and the Pacific, and even Kansas, quiet, distant Kansas, could not escape what was coming. Training stripped him down to the core of who he was. Rifles bruised his shoulder, boots blistered his feet, sergeants shouted until their voices broke. Eli struggled, not because he was weak, but because he was gentle, in a world that demanded brutality. But at night, when lights dimmed and the barracks fell silent, Eli pulled out his sketchbook and drew what the day had taken from him: the fear, the strain, the small triumphs, the men who were slowly becoming his brothers. His art became a way of survival. The platoon called themselves the Ghosts. It started as a joke, a dark laugh in a place where humor was the only shield against fear. "We're ghosts already," Malone once joked, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "The paperwork just hasn't caught up." They laughed. But beneath that laughter was a truth they all felt, deep in their bones. War had a way of turning boys into phantoms long before they died. Eli drew them constantly, their smiles, their exhaustion, the way their shoulders slumped after a long march. He didn't know it at the time, but his sketches would become the only surviving memories of many of them. The Atlantic was a monster. Waves slammed into the troopship with the force of falling buildings. Men clung to railings. Some got sick. Others prayed. Eli tried to capture it all. The terror in the men's faces. The tense silence before dawn. The way the ocean seemed endless and hungry. Every day the horizon looked the same. Cold, gray, indifferent. For the first time in his life, Eli felt truly small. England felt like a limbo between the world they knew and the world they feared. Fog rolled across the camps each morning. Damp and heavy, tents sagged under constant drizzle. Boots never fully dried, but there were moments, brief, fragile moments, where humanity broke through. A nurse smiling at a joke, a soldier sharing a cigarette, Malone teaching a new recruit how to aim without trembling. Eli drew them all, capturing sparks of life in a place built for death. 2 days before the invasion, officers gathered the men inside a dim tent. A giant map of Normandy was pinned to the table. Beach sectors, machine gun nests, artillery points, casualty estimates. The room went quiet as reality settled on their shoulders, like a weight none of them were prepared to carry. "Some of you won't make it," an officer said plainly. Eli swallowed hard. For the first time, he couldn't bring himself to draw. They had been ready as terrified men could be. But the ocean had other plans. A violent storm slammed the channel. Waves rose like walls of black water. Landing craft pitched wildly, nearly capsizing. The invasion was postponed. But the delay didn't calm their nerves. It only stretched the dread, like a taut rope ready to snap. It was the quietest night of their lives. No one slept. No one talked much either. Some men wrote letters they knew might become goodbyes. Others stared at the floor, as if trying to memorize it. Eli sat with his sketchbook, drawing the faces of his platoon by lantern light. Not as soldiers, but as the boys they were, in that final moment before history swallowed them whole. When the ramp dropped, the world detonated. Bullets sliced through the air, in sheets of metal. Sand erupted like volcanoes. Men screamed, fell, disappeared. Eli plunged into the freezing surf, water pulling him down, gunfire pushing him forward. The sea turned red. The beach looked like a nightmare, too cruel to be real. In the chaos, Eli spotted a young soldier, frozen in the surf. The boy's rifle had slipped from his hands. His eyes were wide, trapped between terror and disbelief. Eli grabbed him, not thinking, just moving. Bullets struck the water around them, like rain made of steel. Eli dragged the boy behind a metal barrier and screamed, "Move! You have to move!" The soldier finally blinked, alive again. A shell exploded near the rocks. When the smoke cleared, Malone lay on the ground, blood soaking his uniform. Eli crawled to him, hands trembling. Malone tried to smile, but couldn't. With his final breath, he whispered, "Don't let the world forget us, kid." And then he was gone. Hours felt like days. Eli and the surviving ghosts crawled up the muddy bluffs, each inch of victory. Artillery shook the ground. Smoke choked the air. But step by step, they pushed forward. Eli clutched Malone's dog tags so tightly. They cut into his palm, a promise carved in flesh. D-Day wasn't the end. It was the beginning. For weeks, they fought, through Normandy's hedgerows, walls of earth and vegetation, that turned every field into a trap. Snipers hid in shadows. Ambushes came from nowhere. Villages were ghost towns, with doors hanging open, as if the people inside had vanished mid-breath. Eli kept drawing, not because he wanted to, but because if he stopped, he feared he would forget the men who had died beside him. When the war finally ended, Eli stepped off the train, to the sound of cheers. But cheer was something he couldn't feel anymore. Clara ran to him, arms around his neck, tears in her eyes. Eli held her so tightly, it hurt, because after seeing how easily life could vanish, he never wanted to let her go again. Home wasn't peace. Home was quiet, too quiet. And in that quiet, memories screamed. Nightmares tore him awake. Sudden noises made him flinch. Certain smells, smoke, metal, sea salt, pulled him back to Omaha instantly. Clara held him through it all, whispering, "I'm here. You're safe." But part of him was still on the beach. One night, while unpacking his duffel bag, Eli froze. His sketchbook, the one he'd carried from Kansas to Normandy, to the hedgerows, to the Rhine, was missing. He tore through the bag, his heart pounding. Gone. Lost. Like the men inside it. Months passed. Then one morning, a package arrived from Normandy. Inside, muddy, torn, warped by water, was his sketchbook. A French villager had found it, buried near Omaha Beach, half hidden by sand and debris. He had spent months trying to track down the name, written faintly inside. Eli Turner. Eli flipped through the ruined pages, heart trembling. On the last page, in handwriting that wasn't his, was a message. "If this book makes it home, then so did you. Keep drawing, Turner. For us. Malone." Eli pressed the page to his forehead and cried, for the first time since the war. In time, Eli found a way to heal. Not by forgetting, but by giving. He opened a small art class in a quiet Kansas town, teaching children how to draw the world as they saw it. He never mentioned the war, but every line he guided, every pencil he placed in a young hand, was a tribute to the men whose stories lived on through him. Today, Eli's sketchbook rests behind glass. Its pages, rippled by seawater, stained with ash, scarred by war, hold the final memories of the ghosts. Visitors walk past, never knowing the quiet Kansas artist who carried those pages through hell and back. But if you look closely, if you lean in and read the pencil lines carefully, you can still hear their voices. What if the most important war stories aren't written by historians, but by ordinary people who carried extraordinary memories? What if the greatest acts of courage were never recorded except in notebooks and pockets and fading memories? If you want more untold stories of quiet heroes, subscribe.